about the 1960s.
Good evening again. Welcome to our program.
Late 50s, you had perhaps 25, perhaps 30 at the most of mixed. And you taught all the subjects. You taught all the subjects. So how long were you in the Catholic school system?
Pete's famous Basque chorizo right here in Carson City, as well as Carpinterveda LLC, importers of fine Portuguese olive oil, international teas, and Italian balsamic vinegar aged. So let's turn now to our guest, Ann Bednarski,
Of Boston.
who is a columnist and an educator.
Expectations are very high there on the East Coast right now. And thank you so much for being here tonight. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
You know, Ann, you caught my attention by the columns that you write as a journalist in the Nevada Appeal. And as a former teacher of many years, retired teacher, as a business lady, but as a tutor as well, I found myself being drawn into your concerns. And we're going to talk about that in just a few moments. But I'd like to have you tell us a little bit about your background. Where do you originally come from? What is your background in education and in journalism? Can you help us with that?
I am a Clevelander.
Cleveland, Ohio.
Cleveland, Ohio.
Toledo, Ohio.
Go
We just
Ohio.
found that out.
And I am one of 5 children. I have a twin sister,
Ooh, special.
and we went to Catholic school, and then on to public school, and from there, one of the most interesting things in my senior year of high school was the counselor called me in, and
This again is in Cleveland?
this is in a suburb, Garfield Heights, and I'd never been called to the counselor's office. So when I got the notice, I went there, and when I saw him, he said, "You go to college. You go away to school. You don't live with your sister."
Okay.
And when I left, my sister was sitting in the waiting room, and he had the same message for her. So that evening, because one of my fondest memories of growing up is we always had dinner as a family. And it was the time everybody had their turn to put something into the discussion. So I believe it was Jean who said, "Dad, we got called to the counselor's office today." And he said, "What'd you do wrong?" And so she said, "Well, he told us we should go away to college." And he said, "College? What for?" And actually, he had been planning on us to go to college the whole time, but he wanted us to defend the desire to actually continue our education.
And how important that is for a parent to already desire to send the children away to school, to college. But how interesting that he allowed you to come into the conversation and say, "This is why we'd like to do it," because he could tell if you were serious or not.
Well, we each got to say why we wanted to go to college.
And what was your answer? Do you remember?
That I like learning, and that I have been complimented by many of my teachers as a good communicator and a good writer, and I would like to continue.
To develop those skills, right.
So.
All right, so where did you go to school?
Ohio University.
In Athens, Ohio.
In Athens, Ohio.
Okay, very good place to go. And were you there for 4 years?
Actually, I graduated in 3 years and 1 summer.
Good for you.
And it was part of, I always felt that what the counselor, well, actually he said it. He said, you have to become 2 separate individual people. And part of the drive to finish school is so I could have my own graduation and Jean could have hers.
Okay, you didn't have to share that moment. All right, all right. So you graduated from Ohio University in Athens, and what did you graduate in? As an English major or as a science major, a history major? What was
My
it then?
degree is, I started out as a psych and soc major, and then they said, you better pick one. And I love to study behaviors, so I became a psych major.
And that's a tough route for many people. It sounds like it may be, it is interesting, but the study of behaviors, there's a lot that goes along with that. And it's a tough course.
It is.
Yes.
I think the hardest and most interesting was experimental psychology, where we had to train rats to do something, and everyone else had a maze. So my partner and I decided our rats would learn to dance.
What a challenge.
Which they did. And
Okay.
so, and I graduated from college on August 26th, and on August 30th, I start teaching in an inner city Catholic high school in Cleveland, where I had 7 different classes to teach, and each class had between 68 and 72 students.
Oh, my word.
Many of them were my age or older, and so they saw me as their peer. And I remember the first day of school, my first day as a teacher, I had little index cards with my rules. You don't have to say, can I please go to the bathroom? You can just raise your hand and go, and no gum, no hair combing. And I was standing by the door, and my first class was all boys. And by the time the 68th kid came in, my neck hurt, and my knees were shaking, and I was saying, why am I here? And
what am I doing here?
so my first official act is I took my index cards and ripped them up and threw them in the trash can, and it said, I believe I am going to learn as much from you as I hope to teach you. And that's exactly, Carol, what happened. It was.
I can believe that completely. I never had a class full of 68 or 70 mixed students, let alone all males, all boys, okay, and that's a real challenge. But in Catholic schools, that may have been, the trend, that may have been the position that you were in as a teacher. Public schools at that time, and I'm talking about the 1960s, late 50s, you had perhaps 25, perhaps 30 at the most of mixed. And you taught all the subjects. So how long were you in the Catholic school system?
I was at that school for a year.
All right.
And during that year, I got married, and we moved to Boston, where I taught fifth graders in a very affluent part of Boston. And
expectations are very high there on the East Coast,
where there was no need ever to ask a parent to do anything. They were there.
And excuse me for interrupting, but also along the East Coast, I would say, from Washington on up, Washington, D.C. on up, there are very high expectations for education for students from the parents, from the homes.
Yes, and they... I'm going to tell you, one of the things, I think the most important thing that happened when I was at the high school is because I had so many students, I walked around. I never was at my desk, and I would walk around and see how everybody was doing. And there were no aides, there were no computers.
That's right.
I graded all my own papers. I was also the drama teacher, and the school had never had a drama program. And I said, I love the theater, but I took a graduate level class that summer to be familiar. But one of my students in one of my classes was no problem, but he was an excellent artist.
Mm-hmm.
And I would love on my walk around, he could draw portraits, he could draw buildings, he could draw flowers. And the principal had told me, don't worry, all you have to do is teach the play. The art department will help you, and the wood shop will help you, and home ec will make your costumes.
Mm-hmm.
So when I went to all of them, they all said, oh no, we have way too much to do. So I was a solo act, and I had 300 kids in drama. And so I had to find leadership somewhere. Somebody had to, and this particular young man, whose name was Michael, I was walking from the back of the room, and I put my hand on his shoulder, and he looked up at me, and he said, am I in trouble? And I said, no. I said, you're the art director well, Michael, we stretch sheets on wooden frames, and we use chalk and hairspray. And I told him I want a moving set, and he said, you would? And I said, I do. And anyway, he was with me at school every night till 8 or 8:30.
Very
and
committed.
He found his niche. And the nicest thing that happened is at the end of school, he said, guess what? And I said, what? And he said, someone came from New York, and I'm an apprentice at an ad agency.
Wow, wow.
And I still cry about that, because
the impact that experience had on him gave him a future.
Yeah.
Gave him a future. And you know, Anne, times have changed so much, because students had a sense in the 50s and 60s, of place, but they were really eager to be shown a way where their talents and their skills could really shine. And they weren't taking anything for granted too much. They just wanted to be a part of the big production, so to speak. And you wound up on an East Coast in a city, a historical city, that has set always high standards for their families. Now, how long were you in Boston?
A year.
A year. And then you moved on where?
March Air Force Base, Riverside, California.
Across the country to the military. We're going to come back and pick that story up, in our second half. So don't go away. This lady has traveled. She's got a lot of experience behind her. We'll see you the second half.
Are you looking for a healthier lifestyle? A more nutritious diet? Do you care about quality? If your answer is yes, or if you are just curious, come into Villa Basque Deli and Cafe right here in Carson City, Nevada. Discover fine Portuguese extra virgin olive oils, vintage balsamic vinegars, and a wide assortment of international health teas provided by distributor Carpa Nevada, LLC. In addition to these terrific items, Villa Basque is also the home of Pete's famous Basque chorizo, handmade on the premises from Pete's secret family recipe. Satisfy your culinary curiosities. Don't delay.
Apex SEF provides cutting-edge, hands-on training that effectively addresses today's threats of violence.
The Apex Stay Alive course teaches proven methods for personal protection and attack countermeasures that can be applied in any environment. In your home, at the workplace, or on campus, Apex will teach you the necessary skills to stay alive, including how to recognize and react to an active shooter scenario.
If you knew you had to fight for your life tomorrow, would you train today? Contact us now to sign up for a class in your region.
Hi, I'm Stephen Lincoln with CarsonCityHomes.com, Carson City's original online real estate resource.
At CarsonCityHomes.com, you get effective and easy-to-use tools to help you select your next home today. With our easy-to-use website, you can search listings throughout Northern Nevada and narrow the results by selecting every facet, quirk, and quality you desire. Visit CarsonCityHomes.com.
Blast into summer with Carson Nugget's $1 million red, white, and blue summer giveaway, where we are giving away scooters all summer long. And with daily free play giveaways, cash bash weekends, outdoor barbecues, and more. Come in today to heat up your summer.
Welcome back to the second half of our program, Women to Women. Again, I'm Carol Paz, the hostess, and we're here with Ann Bednarski, who has a fantastic background. She's a columnist for the Nevada Appeal, as well as a past educator. But before we return to Ann, I'd like to thank our sponsors for this second half, carsonnow.org, the place to go on the internet for the latest breaking news here in Carson City. We also like to thank Apex SCF, who teaches the latest methods for personal and corporate safety. And we'd also like to thank our long-supporting peoples at the Nevada Appeal and the Record Courier. They always encourage us to shop locally and to support our local businesses and look for those special book of coupons in their Sunday editions. So let's return to Ann right now. So Ann, you've got us all the way now from Boston, a year in Boston as a teacher, and now we're going to go across the country to California to a military base, correct?
Right.
And going from one coast to the other has to be quite a change, not only in geography, but maybe in mores, maybe in culture. Was it?
Oh, yes.
In what ways?
Well, the weather.
For sure.
What happened is we arrived in Riverside on a Thursday night, and on Friday, everyone in Boston had said, wait till you see the commissary. You won't believe what's shopping in a commissary. And when we came in Thursday, I noticed that UC Riverside was right there, almost next to the base. So I dropped my husband off, and I went to peruse a military base because I had never seen one. And I was searching for the commissary just because it was such a big thing everyone in Boston had talked about.
It was your destination point that night.
Yeah. This was in the morning.
Okay.
And I missed it. And it was a huge building, but it had a very little sign, which I missed. And so I was driving along, and I saw the education office. So I thought, well, it's number 2. So I went in there, and the education office, I said, I'm interested. This was late July, so it was very hot. And I told him I couldn't find the commissary, and he said, as an officer's wife, because I had Bermuda shorts on and long hair with my hair in pigtails, he said they wouldn't allow you in there. And so I said, well, I'm interested in starting graduate school while I'm here. And he said, how would you like a job? And I said, I want to be a tourist. I said, I have been working since I'm 14 years old, and I'm going to be a tourist and maybe go to school. What I have to say about him, and if by any chance he hears this, he was the most persuasive. He was unrelenting about, he said, how about a little job? And I said, I don't want any job. And he said, well, what if you could pick the time of your class? He kept
Offering new
sweetening the
options.
deal. And so I'm thinking, because I have just turned 23, and I'm very young. And he said, so I'm thinking, I've got to request something that he's going to say, oh, I'm sorry, you're going to have to. But so far, he'd offered me size of class, time of class, choose my own books, and
So what did you fall for?
he fell for it. I didn't. I said, well, if I could have a class no more than 20, and I can pick my books, and I can pick the time, and I can have a free hand to teach the way I want to, I'll try it once. And I start teaching on Monday, and I learned 2 days later that all of my students were supposed to go to prison. And they all were given the option of go to prison or join the military. So they joined the military. They got through basic training, and then they found out they couldn't read well enough to read a manual, so they couldn't be trained to do anything. And
would you call that in today's lexicon an alternative school?
no,
No. Okay.
I would not call it that. I think that demonstrates how important it is for children to learn how to read, because, and that was probably the hardest job, the most challenging, and equally the most rewarding job that I ever had, because no one ever missed my class. Everyone learned how to read, but more importantly, they not only were able to go into training, they all were given the training of their choice. And
very special.
Very, very special. I'm very proud to be an American to do that to our kids.
Yes, yes. And you'd like to know where every single one of those former prisoners turned students are today.
I kept in touch with many of them are college graduates. And when I realized that a whole new world opened up to them, and they would say, "Can I buy you a radio?" And I'd say, "I don't want any gifts." I said, "Just all I want is you keep reading." And so they would wash my car. But the guys who came into my class, they had to cut bushes or wash windows. I called them frickin' frack because one held a broom and one held a dustpan. And they couldn't wait to get to the class because they could see at the end of the tunnel they're going to do something more than a menial task. And so I had, my classes were 2 or 3 weeks every day for 2 hours or 3 hours. So I had 27 contracts with the Department of Defense. And
very interesting background, very interesting. Now, what I'm eventually going to be taking us into, my watching audience, are the opinions and the commentaries that Anne writes for the public to read. But we have a little bit more that I want to discuss with her in terms of her background. So, Anne, when we return to your educational background from the military base, then where did you go next?
San Diego.
San Diego. So you're still on the West Coast. And from San Diego, you go?
To Bisbee, Arizona.
Okay, the Southwest. And where do you finally wind up in this 6-location educational experience?
Right here in Carson City.
In Carson City.
Which was a highly well thought out decision.
All right. Now, with this background in education, with this background in geographic places, each one teaching you, obviously, something special to be shared eventually with others. If I were to ask you, what were 2 of the most important, not experiences, but lessons learned from all of these 6 different stations of education in your lifetime at that point? What have you taken and kept with you as a very vital part of your learning experience? Maybe 2 ideas.
Well, I would say the most important thing I learned is I have learned so much more from my students than they learned. I always feel collectively I think we don't give children an opportunity to think and make decisions. And it's in Boston, I would call each member of the class and say, "This is the grade I think you deserve." And they had an opportunity to persuade me. And they all took it. The saddest thing, which is I do want to talk to parents. Those kids, everybody had an opportunity, and I did change. And one person said, "Your grade is too high." And so, but the next day in school, one girl came in and she was crying because when I spoke to her, I said, "You're very capable, but you don't do any work." And
That was the truth, and the truth hurt.
She came to school, and she was crying and crying and crying. And I said, "Do you want to talk about this?" And she actually spit. She spit, not because she was spitting at me, but she had so much junk coming down her face. She said, "My parents never looked at my report card and they gave me $10.
Oh.
And I cried because everyone else was saying, "Well, I have to do this or I have to do that, or I'm getting this thing new or I'm getting..." And so I called for the parents to come in, and I actually thought, Carol, I was going to be fired because...
I know, we do.
Because
think that.
and the parents came in and they wanted to see me, and they wanted the principal there, and I thought, there's no way. I'm out. And I was surprised that it wasn't the mother, it was the father, and it was the principal who said, "This woman cares about what happens to your daughter, and you aren't going to be..." She said, "You're not going to be able to buy her out of everything."
And you know, Anne, what I also hear you saying before we come to a close at in this particular program, I want our audience to know that Anne will be back with us again next week to deal with the columns and the issues that she brings up for us as general public readers, but as parents, as grandparents, as to the things that she sees happening in our school systems today. And it's very important. But what I hear you saying, Anne, is that there was a time when administrators, and this may be true somewhat now as well, but administrators used to come from the classrooms themselves and had that experience of, teaching a class, working with students. And if that element is missing in an administrator, often they don't catch your caring, what you did for these kids. So I applaud you on that. And I just want to encourage everyone to return to us next week when we finish up with Anne's second program and put forth from the Nevada appeal her opinions. And I want you to think about that and let us know if we're really off base or are we on target. We'll see you next week. Have a good evening. Good night.
Hi, I'm Genevieve Frederick, founder and executive director of Pets of the Homeless.
Pets of the Homeless is a nonprofit, all-volunteer organization that provides pet food and veterinary care to the homeless and less fortunate in local communities.
We're a national organization with over 200 collection sites across the United States, one in Australia and a few in Canada. Our national organization, since 2008, we've collected almost 50 tons of pet food that has been distributed through various organizations across the country, like food banks, homeless shelters, and soup dining rooms. With donations from the public, we are able to provide these kinds of wellness clinics across the country. Since 2008, our wellness clinics have provided over 2,500 animals with shots and medical care.
I'm Dr. Woody Allen. I'm a semi-retired veterinarian in Carson City, and I have worked with the Pets of the Homeless for about 4 or 5 years now. And when Genevieve Frederick started the program, our hospital was the first hospital to help her with collecting dog food and finding people that needed our help. On this website, you'll be able to find sources where you can get food on a regular basis if you need it.
With donations from the public, we're able to provide homeless shelters with crates, bowls, cleaning materials, so that homeless with pets can come into homeless shelters and get the services that they need to get out of homelessness.
If you are in need of food, supplies, or services for your pet, or would like to donate or volunteer, visit petsofthehomeless.org.